They laughed at her. Not behind her back, not quietly. Right there at the station as the train hissed and settled, and she stepped down in her blue cotton dress, holding her breath and her letter. She hadn't asked for much, just for someone to meet her, just for kindness. But instead they laughed, at her belly, at the way the dress pulled a little too tight across the middle, at how she looked around hopeful, still like someone might call her name. She'd traveled 2 days by train with a satchel full of carefully folded clothes and a heart that had already been broken more than once. She was a mail-order bride, 37, soft in all the places the world said women should be small, and tired in all the ways she'd never learned to show. The man who was supposed to marry her never showed, but someone else did. A cowboy stepped forward, quiet, solid, said one sentence that silenced the whole platform, "She's my wife now." And for a moment she believed maybe her story was changing, that someone had really looked and chosen her, not out of pity but promise. But what if that wasn't the end of her story? What if the man who claimed her did so because he was lonely, not because he was ready? And what if somewhere down the line another man came along, not to rescue her, but to see her, to help her see herself, to show her that love doesn't just arrive in big gestures on platforms, but in small moments, like setting two plates instead of one, or remembering how she takes her coffee. This is not just a story about being chosen. It's about learning you can choose again, even when you're older, even when you carry more weight than most dresses were designed for, even when the world told you your moment had passed. Because sometime, what you thought was the ending is just where the good part starts. Have you ever felt like you had to settle just because someone finally said yes? Then maybe Mabel's story is for you, because someone called her wife before he really knew her. But someone else will show her what it means to be loved. Let's begin. What does it mean to be brave when the world has already decided how it wants to see you? In a town where dust lingered longer than good manners, the train pulled in with a screech and a hiss, carrying with it a woman who didn't quite fit the picture most folks expected. Her name was Mabel Hart. She was 37, soft through the middle, round in the face, and wore a blue cotton dress that hugged her stomach a little tighter than she liked. She hadn't come for attention. She'd come for a second chance. In her carpet bag was a creased letter read too many times, a mail-order marriage agreement from a man named Tom Ridley, a ranch hand. Kind, he'd said. Honest, not fussy. She'd sewn a fresh hem, brushed her curls, practiced how to smile without showing too much hope. But when she stepped off the train, something shifted in the air. A boy snickered. A woman nudged her friend. Two men laughed openly. No one tried to hide it. Mabel stood tall, clutched her bag like armor, searched the platform for a face she'd never seen but had dared to trust. There was no one. And then a voice. Low, calm. That's her. A man stepped forward, not in a rush, not in a flourish, just steady. He didn't stare at her dress, or her shape, or the sweat gathering beneath her collar. He looked at her. "She's my wife now," he said. The whispers stopped. The laughter died. Mabel blinked. "I'm sorry, who are you?" The man tipped his hat. "Name's Caleb Boone. I reckon Tom won't be showing, but if you'll have me, I got a porch with a rocking chair and a kettle that don't boil over." She didn't know what to say, but something in his eyes told her this wasn't rescue. It was choice. Some women get rescued, others rescue themselves. But sometimes, someone just shows up and stays. But can you trust a stranger's kindness? When all you've ever known is being looked at sideways, can you begin again? When your first step forward is already weighted by every voice that told you you don't belong? Mabel didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. She followed Caleb Boone down the dusty street, her boots thudding heavy against the plank walkway. The stares didn't stop, only changed tone from mocking to confused, from laughter to something quieter. Pity, maybe. She hated pity almost more than cruelty. Caleb walked one pace ahead, not beside her. It didn't feel rude. It felt like space, like respect. At the edge of town, he glanced over his shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded too quickly. "I'm fine," she said. He stopped, turned around. "No one's ever really fine after a welcome like that," he said gently. She blinked, didn't know what to say. So he tipped his head toward the trail that veered off from the main road. Cabin's up yonder 1/2 mile. You want to talk on the way, I'll listen. You don't, that's fine too. She studied his face. It wasn't handsome, not in the way storybooks promised. His nose had a slight bend. His jaw looked like it had met too many hard winters. But his eyes were calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from charm, but from having nothing to prove. She walked beside him then, not behind. And though neither spoke, something unspoken passed between them. Not comfort, not yet, but permission. When they reached the cabin, she expected the usual, a dark room, bare walls, a table still dusty from loss. Instead, she saw a chair rocking slightly in the breeze, a kettle already set out, and beside the door a small clay pot with lavender still blooming. He opened the door, then paused. I live simple, he said, but there's space. You don't owe me anything, Miss Mabel. You can stay the night or the week. I won't ask why you came or why Tom didn't. She stepped inside. The air smelled of pine soap and something like old tobacco warm lived in. I've got nowhere else, she said, voice barely above a breath. He didn't answer with pity. He just nodded. Then we'll start there. Sometimes the first kindness you receive is the kind that doesn't need to be explained or earned. But how long can you rest your feet before your heart asks what this really is? What do you do when someone chooses you freely and everything inside you whispers, that can't be right? Mabel had been at Caleb's cabin for 5 days, 5 sunrises, 5 dinners that tasted like care, even if the potatoes were always too soft. He never asked her to cook. He never touched her arm in passing, never looked at her like a man expecting repayment. That perhaps was what unsettled her most. He chopped wood in the mornings, let her sleep as long as she wanted. Sometimes he whittled birds out of pine and left them on the windowsill. She found one shaped like a sparrow, wings outstretched. It made her cry, quietly, alone. On the 6th day, she found a basket on the porch, gift from the neighbor's wife. Inside were eggs, biscuits, and a note for your new bride. She's prettier than they said. Mabel stared at it until her chest tightened. Prettier than they said. What did that mean? Who was they? What had they said? She didn't show Caleb the note. Instead, she sat by the fire that night with her hands folded too tightly and her shoulders curled inward. You okay? He asked, noticing. I'm fine, she said again too quickly. He didn't press, but his silence invited something in her to rise. You keep being good to me, she said. He looked up. Is that a bad thing? No, she said. It's just, I keep waiting for the part where you realize I'm not what you wanted. He leaned back. You think I wanted a woman who looks like someone else, he asked. She blinked. I think most men have a picture in their head, and I don't fit it. He picked up the wooden sparrow from the mantel, rolled it in his palm. I wanted someone who doesn't leave when supper gets quiet, he said. Someone who knows how to sit still without needing to fill the room. He looked at her not with heat, with steadiness. You came in wearing blue back straight while people laughed. You didn't cry. You didn't run. You just stood. He set the sparrow down. I reckon you're more than I ever expected, and that's the best kind of surprise. Mabel looked at the fire. She didn't know how to reply, but for the first time in her life, she wondered what it would feel like to stop doubting love when it showed up. Some people chase love, others hide from it, but the hardest thing is to stand still and let it land. But how do you stop preparing for rejection when it's the only kind of love you've ever known? So far, what part of Mabel's journey has stayed with you most? Was it the moment they laughed at her body before they knew her name? The sound of that stranger's voice, quiet, steady, claiming her with no shame. Or maybe it was something quieter, like the way he never asked for anything, but kept showing up anyway. Did you feel a flicker of something familiar? A memory of being overlooked, or the ache of being chosen but never truly seen? Because what's coming next might be the hardest part of all. Not running, not rejection, but believing that maybe, just maybe, you deserve to stay. What happens when you're just beginning to believe in your worth and someone from your past shows up to remind you why you didn't before it happened on a Tuesday? The kind of day when the air stood still and even the wind forgot how to move. Mabel was kneading dough in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled, hands dusted with flour. Caleb had gone to town for supplies. She was humming quietly but without fear. Then she heard it. Bootsteps on the porch. Not Caleb's. Sharper. Lighter. Familiar in a way that made her gut twist. She wiped her hands, opened the door, and froze. It was Leland Carver, a man from her old church town, 2 counties east. A cousin of Tom Ridley, the man who never showed. Leland squinted, grinned wide and mean. Well, I'll be. They said he picked up some mail-order fat girl, but I didn't think they meant you, Mabel Hart. Her spine stiffened. It's Mabel Boone now, she said. Calm. Measured. He stepped closer, still grinning. Funny how a man'll settle for round edges when he's got no better options. You always were the kind that tried too hard. She said nothing, but her hands curled at her sides. He kept talking. And I'm guessing Tom would have done the same thing if he hadn't heard about your size before the train pulled in. Smart man. Mabel looked him in the eyes, and then Caleb stepped up behind him. Silent. Still. Problem here, he asked. Leland chuckled. No problem. Just catching up with an old friend. Caleb's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She's not your friend. She ain't yours neither. Yes, she is, Caleb said. And you just made a mistake thinking you could talk to her like that on this porch. Leland shifted. The bravado slipped. He muttered something, tipped his hat too fast, and walked away down the trail. Mabel stood still for a long time. Caleb didn't touch her, didn't say anything. He just waited. Finally, she whispered, I thought I was past caring what people like him said. Caleb said caring isn't weakness. Staying despite it is strength. She nodded slow. I didn't crumble, she said. Surprised? No, he said. You stood taller. That night she didn't bake the bread. She let Caleb make stew. She sat by the fire with her hands around her knees and whispered to herself, I'm not who I was when I stepped off that train. And for the first time she believed it. Sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting the voices. It means hearing them and choosing to believe someone else instead. But what happens when the only person who believes in you starts to need something in return? What do you do when the person who made space for you suddenly starts stepping away from it? It started small. Caleb didn't sit at the table that night. Said he had paperwork to do in the barn. His stew went cold on the stove untouched. The next morning he saddled his horse before breakfast. Didn't say where he was going. And when he came home at sundown, he smiled tight, tired, but didn't look her in the eye. Mabel folded the laundry slower that night, left the lamp burning longer than usual. And when he didn't come in to say goodnight, she wrapped her shawl tighter and stared at the fireplace like it might explain something. 2 more days passed like that. Not cruel, not cold, just quiet, and not the kind that comforts. This was the kind that leaves you wondering what you did wrong. On the 4th evening, she found him out by the fence mending a broken rail he'd already fixed the week before. She walked over slowly. You're not talking to me. He kept hammering. I'm talking, not like before. He paused, looked out toward the hills, then said softly, You ever get scared when something good finally shows up? She frowned. You think I'm something good? He met her eyes. I know you are. She stepped closer. Then why are you walking away? He swallowed hard. Because I'm not used to someone staying. And if I start needing you, and then you leave, his voice cracked. Mabel didn't wait for him to finish. She reached out slow, steady, and took his hand calloused and warm. I'm not a firework, Caleb. I don't light up and disappear. She squeezed gently. I show up. Every day. Even when it's hard. He exhaled slow like he'd been holding his breath for years. And then he let go of the rail. Not just the wood, but the fear. And leaned into the woman who hadn't asked for anything but a place to be enough. Sometimes the people who seem the strongest are just waiting for permission to lean. But what comes next when both hearts have dropped their armor, and it's time to choose whether this is a shelter or a home? How do you know when you belong, not because you're useful, but simply because you're wanted? It was the little things. A second mug placed on the kitchen shelf right beside Caleb's chipped one, even though she never asked for it. A hook beside the door where he hung her shawl when the wind picked up. A chair pulled a few inches closer to his by the hearth. None of it loud, none of it declared, but every gesture said the same thing. Stay. Mabel found herself moving through the house like it might remember her shape. She began baking again, not out of duty, but because she liked the way his eyes crinkled when the biscuits came out golden. He started humming while he worked, just a low, tuneless sound that filled the silences with something warm. One morning while folding laundry, she looked up and saw him watching her from the doorway. Not staring, just smiling, like the life he was building had finally shown up in front of him. Was it always going to be like this? She asked. Like what? Quiet, easy, real. He shrugged. I hoped. Didn't expect. Then added, it's better with you here. That evening they sat on the porch in the kind of quiet that didn't require fixing. The sun painted everything gold. And for the first time in her life, Mabel didn't feel like she had to shrink to deserve peace. You know, she said, I used to think if I could just lose the weight, if I could be prettier or quieter or smaller, someone might want me. He didn't flinch. He just reached for her hand. I didn't fall for smaller, he said. I fell for steady, for strong, for the woman who stood tall on that train platform even while folks laughed. She looked away, tears stinging, then smiled, soft, real. I think I'm falling too, she whispered, and the porch light flickered on behind them. 2 mugs sat on the table, still warm, still full, just like her heart. Some homes aren't made of walls. They're built in slow morning, steady hands, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be chased. But is it really love if no one else has blessed it? Or do 2 people get to choose each other without asking the world to agree? How do you know you're home when the world used to tell you you didn't fit anywhere? Mabel never wore the blue dress again, not because she was ashamed, but because she didn't need it to feel brave anymore. Now she wore cotton aprons that smelled of time. She wore Caleb's flannel shirts when the nights grew long. She wore the kind of peace that doesn't wrinkle. Some days folks from town still stared, some still whispered, but most of them had moved on, and so had she, because Mabel wasn't the story they told anymore. She was the life she built. One morning while Caleb mended fence posts, she brought out coffee in the 2 mugs that always sat side by side. He took his without a word, then said, been thinking we might fix up the back room. For what? For rocking chairs. Maybe for kids, or kin, or just for growing old. She didn't answer with words. She just leaned against his arm. In the silence, she remembered the train platform, the laughter, the shame, and how one man's quiet voice cut through it all. She's my wife now, not to claim her, but to see her, to choose her. And now here she was, still chosen, still choosing. They didn't have rings, but they had 2 spoons in the sugar bowl, 2 chairs by the fire, 2 hands worn but steady finding each other in the dark without hesitation. And maybe that's what love is after all. Not rescue, not romance, but remembering every morning why you stayed. Some women are laughed at, but some women turn laughter into a life worth living, not by shouting louder, but by staying. Mabel thought being claimed was the end of the story. But it wasn't, because being claimed isn't the same as being cherished. It took time, a few wrong turns, a quiet man who didn't speak loudly but made space where others had drawn lines. He didn't say she's mine. He said you're safe here. And then he proved it by showing up again and again without asking her to shrink, perform, or earn her place. That's how she learned the real kind of love doesn't come with noise. It comes with trust. Soft mornings, 2 coffee mugs always filled, and someone who sees the parts of you others laughed at and calls them beautiful. If this story touched something quiet in you, if it made you remember or made you hope, we'd love for you to stay with us here at None. Wild West Saga. Tell us in the comments, did Mabel's journey remind you of someone you know? Would you like to see where her story goes next? And if you know someone who's ever felt too overlooked to be chosen, share this story with them. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of quiet strength, second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't shout, but stays. Until next time, stay gentle, stay open, stay exactly who you are.